So thank you. We're in your hands.
You got the copy?
Yeah. No, put him in.
Yeah. Thank you.
Oh, does it? Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, good morning. Thank you very much for this opportunity, Madam Deputy Mayor and Councillors. As you know, I'm David Lynch from Momentous PR, and I'm here today assisting our client Greg Ward, the Managing Director from Continental here in Christchurch. I'll present effectively the main body of the deputation, and we'll try and whiz through some of it because it's referencing things that I'm sure you're very familiar with. And Greg will take the opportunity at the end to add any additional comment that might be relevant and respond to any questions that you may have. But I think the key thing we'd like to say before addressing the substantive matter before you, and we do have copies of this on its way, it's got caught up in the photocopy downstairs. Continental wishes to commend this council in its decision to repair, strengthen and restore Mona Vale. As we're all aware, we lost a lot in the city, and I think it's tremendous for everyone, but particularly for Continental, who have had a long association with Mona Vale and hope to continue that in the future. Obviously, prior to the earthquakes on the 22nd of February, the owners, Continental, leased Mona Vale Homestead from 1978 through to the earthquakes. The Group 1 Heritage Building, obviously sustained significant damage to the tune of $3 million, and the wards have always been hopeful that at some point in the not too distant future they would be given the opportunity to work with this council in re-establishing the homestead as an award-winning restaurant, wedding and meeting venue. Since the 22nd of February, the Continental have engaged council staff on numerous occasions for the purpose of being updated on how the reinstatement plans were progressing, but unfortunately, despite their best endeavours, from time to time, unfortunately council staff weren't so free with their responses, but under the pressures that this council's under, that's sometimes understood. Continental believe that at the meeting of the Finance Committee convened on the 6th of May 2014, members would have unfortunately and appear to have failed to consider, in their view, all relevant matters and possibly taken into account irrelevant matters before confirming the Mona Vale Homestead lease option that is before you today for your consideration. In presenting this deputation, Continental would like to ensure the members of this council that you understand that they are not seeking to challenge the recommendation before you today. However, they are here to present a number of concerns regarding the robustness of the process that was adopted that resulted with the recommendation you're about to consider. Continental also wish to respectfully point out that although they will raise issues around perceived and actual conflicts of interest involving a number of council members here today, they wish to point out that they acknowledge councillors have been acting in good faith and with the best motives, and that Continental also acknowledges the significant challenges that confront this council right now with many new faces, and there is going to be, in their view, the occasional situation where perhaps due process may be overlooked. In seeking to address their concerns with the council regarding this matter, Continental initially attempted to pursue a number of direct avenues of engagement with various council members, but unfortunately and understandably, with the pressures of time, this was unsuccessful. So why are we here? Well, the council was approached by Continental, and as the previous tenant, they naturally saw the opportunity of working with the council to return once the homestead was reinstated. The purpose of this deputation is, as I've said earlier, to table specific issues with respect to Mona Vale Homestead and the lease recommendations, and we believe, for a number of reasons, that the decision or the recommendations today should be referred back to the Finance Committee for a further examination. In terms of some of the key matters that we've identified in considering this request, Continental believes that the following reasons are grounds for this matter to be reconsidered by the Finance Committee. Continental had legitimate expectations that in accordance with the principles of natural justice, they would be consulted. An inconsistent council process in dealing with leases appears to be evident, and we refer to the example of the Botanic Gardens Visitor Centre. The Christchurch City Council requirement that is a public entity that the general public law obligation is for it to act fairly and reasonably, and it would appear that on this occasion, for unknown reasons, this may not have been followed. The City Council also has a duty to consider all relevant matters before it decides on a decision, and it must also ensure that it dismisses irrelevant matters. A perceived conflict exists with some members of the Finance Committee taking part in the debate when this matter was considered on the 6th of May. We comment now on the council processes that we see as inconsistent in dealing with Mona Vale and Continental. As a result, as we've mentioned, of the earthquake, the homestead was damaged, and clearly Continental had a very high expectation of an opportunity to return. Following the February earthquake, Continental took every available opportunity for ensuring the council understood its very strong desire to be provided with a future opportunity of leasing Mona Vale Homestead, and that it was prepared to make a significant financial investment and contribution towards this project. Continental felt it was important for both themselves and the council to maintain a catering and event presence at Mona Vale, and was most appreciative of the council that allowed them to have an additional separate licence for the lawn, initially for 1 year and then negotiated for a further term of 2 years, which is due to conclude on the 31st of October, and there was a paid arrangement around that licence. Pre-quake, Continental requested an extension through their solicitor. They were advised that it would not be granted as a right, as it was policy that it would go to tender. Continental understood that unless, like current policy, the council had reasons to extend on the basis that a tenant might require additional time to seek a return on investment, that this was unlikely. This was in part why Continental commenced discussions over the need to refurbish and was willing to invest accordingly in the homestead, given that it had been some time that both the council and Continental had undertaken a major refit. From initial discussions with staff, Continental felt that in fact there was a very good chance that they might secure a further term. Continental was therefore understandably extremely disappointed that there was an apparent oversight with council staff, choosing not to notify the company that a meeting was being convened by the Finance Committee on the 6th of May, and at that meeting the Mona Vale homestead lease was to be discussed. Had Continental been given prior notice of this meeting, they would have sought speaking rights and probably would not be here today. Continental had a legitimate expectation that in accordance with the principles of natural justice, they would be consulted. And we draw your attention to the guidelines and principles set out in the Local Government Act that state the following. Councils must provide anyone who will or may be affected by a decision, or anyone who has an interest in a decision, with reasonable access to relevant information, and that these people should also be encouraged to express their views to the council. You'll therefore appreciate why Continental was disappointed at not being given that opportunity. Continental was not provided with the prior notice about the report, about the lease, and about the meeting. They weren't consulted and only learnt of it by chance a day before, in fact late that evening, I believe, before the meeting. Continental respectfully submits that there is in their opinion that it wasn't consistent with the council's requirement that as a public entity there is the general public law obligations for it to act fairly and reasonably. As a public entity, as you know, the council must be seen to be impartial in its decision making, and it may also at times, and this is very important, need to consider the imbalance of power in some funding arrangements where it is significant enough to require a different approach from the way it might normally conduct its business. Given the impact of the earthquake and the huge uncertainty that was impacting on Continental just after the earthquakes, they believed that it was unfortunate that this council, or should I say the council at the time, didn't recognise the need to adopt a different approach to the way it conducted its relationship with their company, and that this might extend to the opportunity of a lease at least being considered and possibly advanced. So the other question we have for you today is what actually is the criteria used by your staff in the preparations for open tender, no tender, or continuing a tender. For example, it is understood that the Botanic Gardens Visitor Centre was awarded to VBase without any call for tender. And if this is correct, it would not be unreasonable to raise a concern that there could be an apparent inconsistency of the approach adopted by the Council that you're now asking Continental and others to follow and have confidence in.
David, your time is up. So would you like to just wrap up what you're saying?
Yes.
Unfortunately, I would have liked to have asked Mr Ward a couple of questions, but you haven't left time. So if you'd like to just wrap up very quickly what you've got to say.
No, that's fine. Well, look, clearly we've raised a number of concerns, and I must turn to the matter of perceived actual conflicts of interest. The issues there are concerning, and with the greatest respect to Councillor Goff, he is the VBase chairman, and also we note that Paul Longsdale, again with the greatest respect, is the director of VBase, and we believe that it was appropriate for those gentlemen to not participate in the discussions with respect to this. Similarly, okay.
You haven't left us time to ask Mr Ward anything, so we're just going to have to thank you for the delegation. I would have liked to have asked him a couple of questions, but having set the standing orders at the start, I can't really break them straight away. So thank you for coming. This is item 16, the Finance Committee, which I understand you would like taken earlier than it is currently being taken. 15, is it? So we will try to accommodate that request.
Could I just make one closing comment?
No, actually, you can't, David. Like 10 minutes means 10 minutes, and I'm going to enforce it with the other speakers as well. That's why we much prefer if you can do it succinctly, and it gives us time to ask questions. But unfortunately, you haven't. So thank you very much for that.
We have a handout anyway, and we would expect a formal response to the questions and the recommendations made in accordance.
There will be a decision made, and obviously those decisions are all made very publicly and openly. And all agendas and items are actually online on the Council's website as well. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Mr Ward. Thank you.